Right. So get ready to listen to this, right? So this is he's called Larry Ellison, right? I've just found out about him because she's just told me about him. Larry Ellison, right? Apparently he is the richest guy on the planet, although it's just said Elon Musk when I checked, but apparently they keeps shifting and changing, right? These are the people like, Zuckerberg and Google who have made all their fortune mainly out of selling rubbish crap adverts all over the world, although I don't know how they've got in front of Jeff Bezos, because Jeff Bezos sells more of everything than anyone, right? Right, okay, let's do this now. So I was just started talking and then my battery went, so I had to stop. But I was just getting onto the subject of Jeff Bezos and the gap of money between him and other mega billionaires, and how Jeff Bezos is selling more things than anyone else on earth, really. But I suppose maybe compared to billionaires selling high price things, he's selling a large amount of low price things. But Zuckerberg really only sells adverts, and Google sell rubbish adverts that no one really wants to see or hear, right? So Larry Ellison, he's meant to be up there with Musk. I don't know how Musk has got so rich. I mean, I know he had his family had a gem mine, right? But he just sells cars. I mean, what about other car companies, right? And SpaceX, it's just like a government project. Loads of different companies do government projects, They've got NASA. I mean, White Branson has got loads of different kind of projects and things with governments, It seems strange how Musk has got so much money, really just from cars and a few other things. I mean, there are loads of entrepreneurs who have got loads of business. All right, he's got, maybe invest in loads of different businesses, but who doesn't? I mean, Dragon's Den was investing in loads of businesses, right? It seems odd. I think there's something strange going on with the whole Bitcoin-y, William, whatever you call them, digital currency type stuff. But anyway, we're talking about Tony Blair and this Larry Ellison, right? And this Larry Ellison is meant to be, one of the richest guys other than Elon Musk, right? And Tony Blair's right in with him, with his whole globalist agenda. Now, the whole point of recording this video is to point out, is basically, this is to do with the Human Rights Act and the law, right? And Blair, this is Blair logic, right? I'm just going to tackle now, I'm going to take on, I thought I'd do a little recording because I listened to a bit of this Larry Ellison, what he was saying, right? And he's into the whole Larry Fink thing, behaviours, we're going to control behaviours, right? So the only behaviours they don't seem to be able to control is their own, because they're compulsively, obsessively breaking the law, and they won't admit it. They're like vampires, they don't see their reflection in a mirror, right? If Blair, I mean, I'd be surprised if Blair punched someone like, Mike Amesbury, not that he would, but if he did, he'd try and say that he didn't, Blair's the type of guy who would be holding a vase of, a vase of flowers or something, and then he could manage to, convince you that he's not holding it, or, you painted him red and he wasn't red, or, if he was like, swimming in the sea, he'd maybe talk you and convince you into that he wasn't, right? So no matter, how convincing your argument is or what points you make, he just, he finds some way to, sort of like, toss it aside or knock it off, or, it's someone else's problem or whatever, or carry on with his spengel. So, right, anyway, enough of my spengel, right? So, I'll just play this, right, and we'll see what happens, because there's a few things that I've just thought of, and it just depends whether I remember them or not now when I press play, when we get to it. I've got to remember, if I remember Keir Starmer, I've got to remember Keir Starmer and all these rights law and stuff. Oh, yeah. Right, okay, let's go.
To surveil people. And Ellison's actually made this clear. He said,
citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And the camera's always on. You don't turn it on and off. Oracle.
Right, so this is the thing, right? he knows, right? Larry Ellison knows about the Human Rights Act and Article 8, right? The right to privacy. He knows it exists, right? Well, in Europe, right? It's a European law. Doesn't actually exist in Australia, I don't think, or America, or Russia, or China, right? This is a thing that is actually specific to us in Britain and Europe, although I don't think Europe really care about it anymore. They're all in on this, facial recognition and digital agenda, right? And then there's all that mysterious thing with those AFD candidates mysteriously dying, or several of them mysteriously dying or something, right? But let's. I'm just gonna keep. I don't really want to try and involve Europe too much, right? So I'm gonna try and keep it kind of Britain, right? So. I'll just play that again, right? So we're thinking about Britain and the actual law, the human rights law. We're thinking about Tony Blair, his time as Prime Minister, what he did with the law while he was Prime Minister. And we're also talking about, thinking about Keir Starmer, and we're thinking about things that the Labour Party are doing now, right? That's what we're thinking about when we're going to listen to this, right?
So that it's in one place, so that governments can use it to surveil people. And Ellison's actually made this clear. He said
Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And the camera's always on. You don't turn it on and off. Oracle,
So he's going, right, that he's saying that. What he's saying is that he's not saying that he'd like people to be on their best behaviour, right? He's actually trying to make out, right, that...
is to take a bathroom break. And we'll turn it off.
So he's actually dictating what actually is going to happen, right? So he's not saying like, oh, let's vote on what happens, or this could or could not happen, or, this may or may not happen. He's saying that this is what people are going to do, which is the same type of lingo that tech people say, like, in the future we're going to have this and we're going to have that, like, it's inevitable, like, maybe we shall not have it, right? So they're already dictating. So he's speaking as a dictator, right? And he's telling you what is going to happen, right? They will be doing this, right? Like they're not going to be doing anything else. Now, with the behaviour thing, this is the thing, right? If everything is being filmed all the time, right, and if everyone's being watched, why would they be on the best behaviour just because they're being filmed? I mean, football matches are usually filmed. There's lots of things that are being filmed, or that have always been filmed, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that people are on their best behaviour or not, right? The police are filming riots and things now, but, people aren't necessarily what they call on their best behaviour just because they're being filmed, right? If they're being filmed, right, only through law, right, the law and legal consequences. It's not, they won't be on their best behaviour because they're being filmed, right? So he's wrong about them being on the best behaviour because they're being filmed. They won't be on their best behaviour because they're being filmed, right? They'll just be on their best behaviour because they're being filmed, and there will be legal consequences for all their actions, right? But this is the thing. Who decides what the law is? What is the law? What is the legislation going to be? Now, at the moment, everyone's under policies, and you don't vote for policies. These guys, this guy here, right? Larry Ellison and Tony Blair and, Keir Starmer are making up policies with these platforms, Zuckerberg, Musk, and, Bill Gates and Google, right? And they've coerced and encouraged us to go on these platforms, and they weren't content with the normal law. They weren't content with legislation and the law. They've actually made their own rules called policy. And they've said, if you don't follow this policy, you will be removed from our platforms and you won't be on there, right? Or you'll get your stuff deleted, right? Now, that's not the law, that's policy. So people be on their best behaviour, or else the policy, right, is going to be in effect. But no one voted for that policy, they made it up. So they're definitely in the game of them deciding what the rules are going to be. The few decide what the rules are going to be for the many, not the many deciding what the rules are going to be for the many, right? And also, in those rules and policies, which they're actually, well, the behaviour is going to be imposed by threat, right? The threat of action. Now, this is the thing. When you've got the threat of action by the law, you know, and it's the law of the country, right? And then you're going to be, you know, prosecuted by the authorities. But this is the thing. How they've got to this stage where they've got these platforms and policies on there in effect and in force, they're actually, some of these laws are illegal. Like removing politically protected, constitutionally protected content in electoral and democratic processes like elections and petitions, right? Signing petitions to get the law made or changed to decide what the law is, right? What are these laws going to be by behaviours is by people signing things to get the government to do it, right? Now, their policies are threatening us that they are going to remove, damage, delete, or interfere with our processes if we don't behave, right? But they haven't got a legal right to in England because we don't have Section 230, which is American law, and they don't have any right to do it. But they did it anyway. And they knew that. So they this is where this stupid medical pandemic comes in when they're trying to bust out all these rules for, you know, you can't say this or that, because they want it to kind of like, you know, flex a bit of muscle power and strength to do more of what he just said, control behaviours, right? Even though it's constitutionally protected, they stop professors from having opinions and so forth, which is ridiculous, right? When do professors misbehave? When do academic experts misbehave? And what is the misbehaviour? They're merely expressing a scientific opinion based on their research, study and facts, but they weren't allowed to give their opinion. So already we've got this. Larry Ellison, right, believes that mature, adult, qualified academic professors who haven't usually broken the law in their life and have got the highest qualifications in society should do what Larry Ellis says, right? Or else he'll threaten them to remove from the platform. Now, that is merely from talking and expressing an opinion, right? So they're not punching anyone, kicking anyone, you know, poisoning anyone, you know, kicking the car window through, breaking into the house or anything. They're merely doing their job as an academic, which they've been trained for, studying, researching and questioning things, but they weren't allowed to do that, right? So Larry Ellison does, in part of his principles and ideas, which is what they were trying to get through from the World Health Organization, right, in his ideology for this behaviours, includes mature, adult, grown-up professors who are the most educated in any field of subject, and only the professors that Larry Ellis and Tony Blair want to be able to have an opinion can have an opinion. So it seems to me that this behaviour making seems to be quite selective, beyond even the laws which were enacted by the king, right? Beyond even the laws enacted by the king, right? And these policy platforms which are a private company business which they came up with, right? In America, imposing us on a country in England when they don't even have the legal right to take down democratically protected material, and then the government are having to come up with new laws in order to try and shut mature, adult, well-behaved people up just because they're not saying the things that they want them to say, right? So on that, I think Larry's talking absolute tosh, right? And we're getting into slavery. Look, right? If you can choose whether to do something or not do something, you're free to do it. Now, if someone's controlling you, right, so you can't do something, then, you know, we're going back to a slavery-based model. Slaves don't do things because they can't, right? This is the thing, right? Slaves behave because, you know, it's not possible for them to not. And this is effectively what they want to do. What he's trying to say is, if everyone's being filmed all the time, and if they've got a legal thing behind it where they take away these juries, right, and then they just they film you do something, and because they've filmed you do it, it's, they're going to say that, it's impossible for you to say that you didn't do it, and then you automatically, effectively, they want to say that, well, you face punishment, right? So it's, everyone has called it a digital prison, right? It's digital prison. But it's not just that, right? He's talking about being filmed all the time. So for that part of it, being filmed all the time. Now, in the European Union, this right to privacy, it says in that Blackstone's Guide book, it says that there has to be an urgent pressing social need. And there can't be any ulterior motives, right? Now, the urgent pressing social need, right? So, social needs when you're socialising, okay? And it has to be an urgent one, right? Making money and selling things and business is not an urgent pressing social need, right? Because there's no urgent social need to make money, right? That's a business and profit orientated thing. It's industry, right? That's not social, because like if it was, then when Jeff Bezos' staff are at work and when Jeff Bezos' staff are packing boxes, they're not they've got to pack boxes. They've got to do what they're told, right? They might be able to talk or say the odd word, but they're definitely not there might be an urgent pressing social need for them to be able to talk and not have to be fully like robots, right? But they're not. They're not like, when you're in the army and you say, permission to speak, sir, or, at ease, soldier, or, going for a cigarette outside. When you socialise, on their lunch break, in fact, there's an urgent pressing social need for a lunch break and a dinner break, right? There's urgent pressing social need there and actually, maybe not even social need, just like actually for health and safety, for rest. For peace of mind, that might not even be you socialise on lunch breaks, but they might even be there for physical rest, so you don't pass out and get exhausted, and so you can actually eat something. So eating and nourishment isn't necessarily an urgent social need, but usually people do eat when they are socialising. But the
truth is, we don't really turn it off. Well, constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And the camera's always on. You don't turn it on and off. Oracle.
Well, you do turn it on and off. You turn it on and off when he says the camera's always on. You don't turn it on and off. So is he talking about these current smartphones that we've got now? Does he know something that we don't know? Because as far as I know, I turn my phone off, right? Or the battery runs out. Does Ellis already know something we don't know about, have they fitted, what actually is in the tech of phones now? You can't take your battery out, right? Can it, listening to what you're saying, just merely on the heat from the house, the warmth from the house, or from the sun shining on the screen or whatever? We don't know. We know that, some digital watches, even when the battery goes, they can be extremely, they have radios that can run on the lowest power possible, Have they effectively got it so when you think, your phone battery's gone, it could still last for a week and listening to what you're saying? Is that what he's saying? Is Larry Ellis saying that, well, as far as we've got it now, when you think your phone's run out, it's not actually really run out of battery. We just have made it so that you can't actually use it for anything practically yourself. But if we want to listen into you, it'll be constantly listening into you for, weeks or months after, just on, 3 degrees centigrade or something like that, right? Is that what he means when he's saying it never gets turned off? Or is he talking hypothetically, right? We do turn things off. I turn things off, right? People turn things off. So I know people turn things off. So, he cannot be right. People do turn things off. You turn your TV off, right? What he's saying is that he wants people not to turn things off, and he thinks they should be left on all the time. But that's not privacy. It's not privacy. Now, the law in Europe says that you've got the right to privacy and to not let anyone else know. You know, people don't have to know what you're doing unless there's an urgent social need, right? It's the urgent social need when they do know, not when they don't know, right? This is the thing. So, you know, when you're at work, there is no pressing urgent social need at work because you're not meant to be socialising except on lunch breaks, right? So this should be this insight here now that I'm going to speak should be a brilliant mind bender for insight, right? So I'll hit you with this one, right? Just to make sure that I'm not talking nonsense all the way through this, right? This is going to be like a 1-2 punch, boom, 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 right? Jeff Bezos, Amazon, right? Packing boxes. Everything's been filmed, right? And apparently if they're working 24 hours a day, it never gets turned off, according to this monkey, right? You know, Larry Ellison. Where's the urgent pressing social need? None. None. None, Ellison. None. There is zero urgent pressing social need in England, in Europe, right, Ellison, for Bezos to have 24-hour surveillance at all, because it's at work. They're not meant to be socialising. They're meant to be working. So where's the urgent pressing social need when they're not socialising, right? In fact, if they were socialising, then they wouldn't be working. So that would, if they were socialising, they wouldn't be working, right? But Bezos, that's why he's got the camera there to make sure they are working and not socialising, right? But Bezos's need is to make sure they're not socialising, not that they are, right? So he wants to make sure they're not socialising and wants to make sure that they're working. But working's not an urgent social need. It's a financial need to go in and make money. Because if everyone had money, they would need to go into work, right? And they would be socialising all the time, right? So when they're working at Amazon, they're not socialising. So you don't need the cameras on. But guess what? That's when Jeff wants the cameras on them all the time and not turned off because they're working, right? He wants to know what they're up to. But it's his factory, right? They're not in their own private place. But that's a good place to start with it, right? Now, this is how they've started to construct all this. Notice that all the big factories go up and then Bezos takes over and then they've got everyone getting these cameras on at work. But under the Human Rights Act, you don't need them at work and there's no need for them at work, right? So the place where actually that you've got more, the best chance you've got under ECHR of getting cameras made illegal, right, to say that they're unlawful and we shouldn't have them, right, is Amazon. Because under the Human Rights Act, ECHR, Article 8, there's absolutely no grounds under the human rights for needing them when you're working, because you're not socialising, you're working. So there's no urgent need. Now, what's the ulterior motive? You know? Now, I actually think there could be an ulterior motive at Amazon besides just, Jeff Bezos being nosy, studying human behaviours, right? So when people are going to be packing boxes, how often do they get bored? How often are they messing around, And then if they, do this or that, what can we tweak? What can we change? What can we change in the policy, right? We'll observe them. We'll study them, right? Behaviours. We've got to control behaviours. How better to learn how to control behaviours, like in the Big Brother program, that not Big Brother Watch, the campaign. We're talking about Big Brother, the actual TV program, which was immediately released and put out to the whole world as soon as Tony Blair had got that through. Within a couple of years, it was on TV and everyone was watching it, right? Being spied on at home, right? To staff training, senior staff training, observations of staff, how they behave, studying them, and then being able to experiment with different policies or different gaffers, senior staff, and different things to try and stop them doing, or different things to try to control their behaviour, right? So the ulterior motive is study objects, right? Now, when you go to work, you're going to be paid to pack boxes, right? You go in to pack boxes. Now, if they're not telling you that you're a study subject, right, for behaviours, Larry Fink and, Larry Ellison's behaviours program, right? So that's an ulterior motive because you're going into work to earn money, right? And as far as we know, Amazon's there to pack boxes and send stuff out. So to study the staff and build strategies and techniques of how to control humans in a work environment, to me, seems an ulterior motive, right? It's like a science experiment motive. It's not why people go there. People go there merely to get paid, right? They want the money, right? And Bezos is on the face value of it. He wants the boxes packed and shipping out, right? So anything outside of that is an ulterior motive, right? And then obviously they're not getting paid much money. They're not getting paid very much money. And the cost of living is going up, but yet all these multi-billionaires are getting richer and richer and richer and richer and richer, and they're building all the money that is black hole in government. They're not giving it all back to the government, right? Because the government's in minus, right? So this idiot here, Larry Ellison, and then these people, so they've still got reasons why they might want to rob or steal because they're poor or whatever. And then, so we need to observe and control their behaviours, when they're out on the streets in town. So we'll put CCTV everywhere, right? Well, maybe they wouldn't have been stealing things if they're out in town, if these people are paying them more money, right? And, this is the thing. And then, people, don't feel safe in their homes, right? So then they try and get people to, get CCTV, but there's no urgent pressing social need for CCTV in your home for socialising, right? That's purely for security. Why would anyone want to rob into your house if they weren't poor, right? If everyone were getting paid loads of money, right, and these billionaires weren't making all the money, well, nobody was breaking 20 houses, they wouldn't need CCTV, right? So it seems to me like, why would everyone want cameras absolutely everywhere and never turned off if everyone was getting paid loads of money and they weren't poor and they didn't need to steal or rob anything, right? Well, just basically for the sake of it, right? So you can plan. It seems like the ulterior motive was trying to get better control over the staff when they're at work. And then what he's saying now is like, everyone's going to be on their best behaviour. And how's that? Oh, because we've been studying them, and now we've been putting these policies on the platforms, even though it's illegally interfering with their democratic process and rights, which is how you're meant to make law. But hey, fucking screw that law. We've got our own policies now, and fuck that law. That law's crap. We've got them all under this policy. In fact, the threat of the policy is going to keep them in order, control the behaviours, and we'll even, take down the fucking pipsqueaky petitions, their political processes, their democratic processes. We might even take down some election material as well. YouTube have got a policy on interfering with electoral processes, yet what if you bang up some obscene material, for an election campaign, it gets taken down? That's interfering in electoral campaigns, right? Apparently they can do it on the policy, right? Well, if you're paying for ads, you might get a special category and then they won't. But, if you've got a normal channel, nothing to say that you can't use a normal channel to advertise, but you're not paying for that, right? So there's that as well. And if you're following this, let's just go back a bit again because I want to get his comment.
Will be on their best behavior because we're.
It's in one place so that governments can use it to surveil people. And Ellison's actually made this clear. He said
citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And the cameras.
Well, he said he's saying that we're constantly reporting and filming everything that's going on. So he's saying that they're doing that now, right? They're already doing that now. But not all countries have got this yet. But he's saying that they're doing it, right? No, he said citizens will be on their best behaviours. Does he actually include himself and Tony Blair as citizens? Because, I don't think Tony Blair's ever in England, Are they citizens when they're up in their, Air Force One or private, jet planes or whatever? I mean, are they even citizens? This is the thing. If you haven't got UK citizenship, then you're not a citizen of the UK. I mean, I don't think Larry Ellison's not a UK citizen. So if Ellison, right, is Ellison in London, right, walking around, kicking a window through, a citizen not on his best behaviour? Because he's not even a citizen, right? So whether or not Ellison behaves or doesn't behave, if he's in London, he's not a citizen. He ain't a citizen of London, is he? Ellison is not a citizen of the United Kingdom, right? So when Ellison is in England, he ain't a citizen. He's not a citizen. So, this is the thing. So he didn't have to be on his best behaviour because he's not a citizen. Hey, I'm Larry Ellison. I'm in England, but I'm not a British citizen. So, you all make sure that all the citizens are on the best behaviour, but I don't have to be, because me and Tony Blair, we've been knocking some legislation through, we've been, Tony Blair got ushered in just as they'd, put the legislation against the judge's oath, right? So then they were coercing. Right. So best behaviour. Now, this is the thing. This guy is trying to pitch that citizens should be and will be on their best behaviour because they're being filmed and any crimes or offences will be instantly recorded and supposedly, by the time he's finished doing his whole setup, they're just going to be instantly prosecuted and convicted, right? Without a jury with the way they're going, right? Without any jury trials. Possibly even instantly. I won't be surprised if they make police officers into judges after they got rid of the jury, right? Like Judge Dredd. But anyway, citizens will be on their best behaviour. But in England, if Ellison's visiting England, he ain't a citizen of England, right? He's not a citizen. He doesn't have citizenship in England, right? So he doesn't have to be on his best behaviour. Now, this is when we get to Tony Blair and the government, who are privileged, right? Now, do they have to be on the best behaviour? Do they have to be on their best behaviour? Well, this is the thing. As Tony Blair came into British government, I think it was John Major or whoever was they just put legislation in which did a big favour for criminals that if they confess and give information, then they'll get a reduction on their sentence. Now, that's doing them a favour for giving information and getting a confession out of them, right? That's against the judge's oath for no fear or favour, right? And it's also against the Claim of Right Act because it creates an oath that is contrary to law, right? Oaths that are unlawful or illegal, right? And then we've got Tony Blair creating the Senedd, right? Even though the 1705 resolution said that Parliament can't create any new privileges, right? Yeah, they created the Senedd and gave them privileges, which never existed before. So that was illegal. And then Tony Blair decided that he was going to have a peer, a House of Lords, as the Attorney General of England, even though it was only Geoffrey Palmer. I think only Geoffrey Palmer, as we know, has been put into the House of Lords while he's serving as Attorney General, and only because of the Civil War, because there's a conflict of privileges between the Lords and the Commons, right? And they're meant to have the Attorney General in the House of Commons and be available at the bar, and he's meant to be there to serve the public. Contact him. Lords don't have to reply to the public, and when the Commons, when any of the House of Commons have misbehaved, like with the Privileges Committee, they're meant to make judicial decisions and vote on things, and then they can impeach them in the Lords, but it has to be voted in the House, and the Attorney General's meant to advise them on the law, right, and help them with the law when they vote, and then when the Speaker goes into the Lords to impeach them, it's because the House of Commons have already voted on it judicially, themselves, independently, and therefore then they will be tried in the Lords as a court, right? And the Attorney General is meant to be like the representative, right? He's not meant to be a member of the Lords because the Lords are the judges, aren't they, right? And he will have a representative from his own Commons, and also there's the House of Commoners don't order Lords. Lords oversee the government, right? But the Commons don't command Lords in the sense of telling them what to do, other than, they're sort of working them in government departments and they're overseeing it. But you don't, the Commons don't give orders to Lords, right? Other than they put the legislation through and then they pass it backwards and forwards, right? So having an Attorney General who's a peer and saying, do this, do that, go do this for me, go do that for me. He's your servant, right? So they're not the servants of the House of Commons, right? So if Keir Starmer's going to Baron Hermer, a lord, Keir Starmer, like, saying, oh, solicitor do this, solicitor do that, solicitor do this, go, file me a fucking paper clip in the cupboard, right? You don't do that to lords. So that's another reason. But there's that Carl Wick book, The History of Parliamentary Privilege, has got chapter V, all about conflicts of interest in privilege. But there are lots of reasons why you're not meant to do it, and they only did it because of the Civil War, and then they went back to normal again. So that was another thing that Tony Blair did. And I think the Labour Party, even though I think the whole Labour Party being working class is a complete utter illusion. Tony Blair went, to Lincoln's Inn or Gray's Inn, wherever it was, right? And he isn't poor, right? He had a proper education and he was an employment lawyer. Yet still, the Labour Party as a style and the Labour Party as a kind of taste, that it's got a lot of members who are from working class, and the members are from working class. People who vote for it are. And I think that the Labour Party have always got this kind of one-upmanship thing. And I think getting a leash on a lord is quite a party trick for the Labour Party to do, having a court jester or something, because, the Conservatives have never been bothered about it. A lot of Tories and Conservative members are solicitors and lawyers, right? And they're already, I'm already a barrister, it's they know the law and they command the law and they're confident with the law in themselves, in their own person, in their own body, and they don't need to, they've got nothing to prove to the House of Lords, they can sort of they don't need to if you're a barrister and you're making a hell of a lot of money out of it, and that's your job, then you are proficient and expert in the law. You're a professional, legal professional, right? And you want to deal with the law, because you can deal with it, right? But there's something with Tony Blair and the Labour Party where it's Labour aren't good enough. They want to, get someone who's, climbing up the rungs of the ladder. It's almost like, climbing rungs on ladders, now we'll get someone higher and higher and higher and higher authority. They're climbing up the authority ladder, you know what I mean? Whereas I think the Conservatives already think that, they're already up, they've already got the authority, if they're a lawyer. Or I think it's almost kind of like getting some sort of advantage or something. The Labour Party think they can get something over the Tories if they can have their Attorney General in the Lords or something like that. The Conservatives have got, really brilliant, high-paid lawyers, but if the Labour Party can manage to get one over on them, we can trump that by having a Lord as our Attorney General, somehow makes him better. But no, you're not. You don't order. The Commons don't command and order Lords. That's not how it works, right? So there's that. But the thing with going back to the Senedd, that I think they'd already violated that 1705 resolution in 1868 when they let judges determine election petitions. Because firstly, right, it was privileged only to the House of Commons. So if you allow a judge to do it, you're giving him a privilege which he didn't have. Only the House of Commons had it in committees. And the committees investigated election petitions, I think, for free. We'll have to check up on that, but I'm pretty sure that it's like people petition Parliament and then the committee would look into it and call for the evidence. And that, if that's the case, and I've got a lot of them in the journal, I've got a couple of journals right next to me now with a lot of the petitions in full, right? I think they did go to the committees. If that's the case, then, it follows with the Bill of Rights that elections ought to be free, because then, the taxpayers covering for the expenses, but no one's actually making any kind of profit. No independent lawyers are really going to be making any significant profit out of it. Now, I think maybe the person who brought the election petition and complained might have got a lawyer to write it, but they will be claiming the costs probably back from the government if they won directly from Parliament, right? And the investigation itself and that would be under the committee, and they'd call for the evidence based on the claim, and they'd sort of direct the proceedings. And it wouldn't be like now where, you know, you've got a person couldn't afford to bring the petition because they'd be hit with costs. It didn't work like that, and you didn't have a deposit as an obstruction. So, but that goes back to 1868. But in the current deposit they've got is ridiculous. Apparently they're saying, oh, like, you know, bankrupt people. So that's another corrupt practice in the legal sector. But what was the other thing? What are the other things? Tony Blair's got his war crimes. There's the oaths. There's the Senedd. What else is there? There's a few more things with Blair, and I'll have to look at my list. I can't remember all of them, but there were quite a few things that he's done unlawfully while he was in government, Labour. Also, with that number 10 e-petitions website, taking e-petitions out of the judicial authority of the House of Commons and trying to get it into number 10 and then passing it off to government departments without really there being proper judicial determinations in. What about the use of privilege? And then, you know, MPs are going to vote on it, and you know, you may have your privileges dealt with at the bar, and there's all kinds of, you know, grievances and government you see, government departments don't have any judicial power or authority, and you might be wanting to scrap a government department, right? You know, if you want to, you know, scrap the, you know, if you want to scrap the Department of Transport, it's not a good idea to send a petition off to the Department of Transport to let them to, you know, decide what they're to do about it if you want to scrap that department, because they might not want to be scrapped, right? It's going to be your elected MPs who vote on it and make decisions what happens in different departments of government, right? Or pass it off to them after they've kind of made a judgment or order on it, you know, or what to do, or to go sort it out after. So Tony Blair, he made it look like he's doing us a favour keeping it with technology, but he's like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to modernise while we strip more power away and take it out of the core of Parliament. You see, Parliaments are going to be called to redress grievances and strengthen and you know, amend the laws, right? As much. And then by the time, you know, we're finished, there's hardly any redress of grievances, and it's all business, you know, Labour Party business getting put through Parliament or whatever, and a few private bills, and then, you know, and he's getting those petitions are just getting, you know, chucked off to different departments or whatever from number 10. But when you engage in those, you want the authority with it. It's the authority and the power that comes with it, and the ability to use that authority to get a large demonstration behind you, a very strong, powerful representation in order to compel the government to act. But, you know, the Parliament weren't even voting on them, they were just passing them off to places, right? You know, it's even worse. I don't even think they were doing it like the Ombudsman. You know, at least the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman's got to sign things off, right? When you see, that's when you complain about those departments. So, you know, in fact, if there was grievances, and if they had a number 10 Downing Street website and they're passing them off to departments, what's the point? Because that's what the Ombudsman's there for. If you've got grievances about departments, then, you know, your MP signs it off and it goes to the Ombudsman, and a grievance about departments. So it would be pointless having a number 10 Downing Street site for departments. But this is the thing. Government departments don't make and change the law. Parliament does, right? So if you're wanting petitions specifically to get the laws made or changed, then you'd want it to go to Parliament because they've got to vote on it, right? But number 10, he wasn't doing it as if it was Parliament. And I don't think they'd even they didn't have a proper petitions committee until 2010, because they scrapped it around 1973, I think. They got rid of a proper committee. They had this woman clerk who was just kind of like the clerk of petitions, I think. And then they had that Eve Sampson knocking around with it as well, who was, I don't think she was competent or capable as a clerk of Parliament to stand up for the rights of the people or not. They used to have it in the oath, you know. It was part of the oath of the MPs to defend and protect the rights and the constitution of the subjects, but then they removed that from the oath, so there's less emphasis on it, and then just changed it to, like, you know, we've got to, you know, act according to law. But they don't think there is any law to act according to. This is the thing. They're under privilege, right? So when they say, oh, according to law, but they're under the law of Parliament. But ironically, there are acts you've got of law you've got to comply with and follow, because Parliament does operate in standing orders, but there are some acts of law which have to apply as well. Like, obviously, you know, you got treason and things like that, and Tony Blair scrapped that treason death penalty, didn't he? And then I think that you know, you've got observation of due process of law in the Bill of Rights and Magna Carta and things like that, which apply to government. There are laws that they've got to follow and obey themselves. I wish I could remember all of those other things as well for Tony Blair. There's a list of things, but I think there's the Senate's a big one, and then you've got well, anyway, oh yeah, you've got all this Human Rights Act stuff that he's been knocking out. So all the Human Rights Act stuff and the right to privacy and everything like that, as soon as he put that act through, he was implementing these mechanisms of implementation of these other organisations. That he's openly admitted this, that they're going to make changes through these other organisations. Now, what you might say, well, what was the point in making the Human Rights Act at all and having these rights if he was just going to break them all? Wouldn't it be a bit silly if he just didn't create it and then he did these other things anyway? Well, this is a thing. I think that when you're going to have a long-term strategy plan of taking over the whole planet and doing all this kind of, like, you know, complete and total dominance and control, you've got to try and make out that, you know, you're doing it for the good of the public, or, you know, for the humanity, right, or mankind, or to make things better. And I think this is the thing, you know, when really you're jipping people off and deceiving them, right? So if you come out with this, you know, brilliant thing that's meant to be, oh yeah, you know, everyone can be free, you know, completely. This is the thing, right? Look, right? We've got this guy here in front of us, okay? We've got this guy, okay? Larry Ellison. Now, Larry Ellison is talking about behaviours and controlling behaviours, like, you know, everyone's going to be under, you know, the best behaviour. But this is the thing. Tony Blair put this act of law through, the 1998 Human Rights Act, that was all proud of, right? And some of the main articles are freedom of speech. You can say what you want. The word freedom. Freedom is the first word. Freedom of speech, right? And expression, which the ideology of that is you're completely free to speech, to say what you want. And you're completely free in the way to express yourself as you want. Now, it seems to me that the ideology behind complete freedom of speech and complete freedom of expression, the idea behind it is that you're free to say and do what you want and express yourself completely how you want, right? So where is there anything to control there or behave? Because you're free to behave as you want in expression and speech, right? But I don't think that Ellison is model and strategy of what he's pitching is intending you to have complete freedom of speech and expression at all. right? In fact, Starmer's already going, no, you can't say what you want in restaurants, and, you know, you can't say what you want here or there, and, you know, certain expressions, you know, you can't express yourself in, you know, you can't practice your religion here or there outside this or that. So they're immediately shutting it all down. And then they're always getting rid of, you know, abortion. They're trying to dick around with abortion and, you know, all this assisted suicide stuff, you know, when it's meant to be life itself has a right to live, but they're already trying to find ways, you know, how they can, you know, get rid of life or turn life off or shut life down, right? Whether it's in the womb or whether it's because you're ill or something like that, right? So this whole pitch for, everyone's going to be the best behaviour, right? Well, you don't have to be under your best behaviour if you've got the complete total of freedom of speech, because you can say what the bloody damn well you want. And this is the thing with freedom of expression, right? Everyone's going to be under their best behaviour, but you don't have to be under best behaviour in a world where you've got freedom of speech and expression. Because if you're angry, you can express it. And if you're sad, you can express it. And if you're frustrated, you can express it, right? Now, in this Larry Ellison model, if you're angry, then, you know, you wouldn't express anger because you're under best behaviour, but you might be angry. So how are you free to express how you feel in that situation if you're angry, right? You know, not by rolling over on the floor laughing, right? Usually by shouting. That's an emotion. Well, you wouldn't have that you wouldn't be allowed to express the emotion of anger like these emojis, right? If you were angry, you would not express anger unless you say, I'm sorry, sir, but I'm quite angry at the moment. What is anger? What is anger itself? You know, if you're happy and smiling, that's not anger, that's happiness. So if I'm angry with Larry Ellison and I go, hey, Larry, it's nice to see you today. I'm kind of angry with you. Have a nice day. Well, didn't sound like he was angry with me. He didn't feel like he was angry. He seemed quite happy. I think he might have been lying to me. He seems very pleasant, you know. Well, actually, no, Larry. He was furious with you, but apparently he's got to be in his best behaviour. So actually, he was pretending to be happy. He was really angry. So therefore, you actually made him lie about how he felt just for your benefit, so you didn't have to confront his anger full on. You know, we're into this kind of territory now with it. So their ideology does not hold up. What they want to do is, like, you're furious with them, you're angry with them, they've nicked all your money, robbed you blind, you know, made you work in a box factory, filmed you, studied your behaviour, right? Got you saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, right? And then, you know, you can't be angry about that. You got to thank them for it. Hey, Larry, I'm really happy with you paying me £2.63 an hour, you know, a minimum wage. That's great. I'm very grateful for that minimum wage, you know. I was going to smash the machines up like the Luddites, but I thought, no, actually, you know, Larry's paying me peanuts, and what I should do is carry more boxes for him, you know, and maybe I should carry him around in like a gold chair like the king and say, hey, Larry, I can never be happier. You're paying me absolutely sweet fuck all. And, you know, you've got all those billions there, you know, maybe I might help come in on the weekend and work for free. I'll volunteer. I couldn't be happier. In fact, I won't see my family for 6 months either, and I won't go on holiday. I'll just work for you all the time, Larry, you know, and I'll just I'll express the best behaviour. You'll never have seen any better behaviour ever. You know, this is great. In fact, you know, I feel like someone has got rid of my anger. You know, I'm a happy person. In fact, you know, Larry, even when you hit me around the face with a metal bar the other week, you know, ouch. Oh, I felt no pain. You know, I'm like the Terminator robot. Hey, Larry punched me 7 times because I didn't deliver the boxes on time. He hit me around the head with a metal bar, and I'm like, hey, I couldn't be happier. Thank you, Larry. Thank you for that. I feel so refreshed now. You know, I'm full of energy. I want even more work, right? You know, but apparently, well, Isn't that an assault from Larry? Didn't Larry just assault him with a metal bar? Well, I'm not a citizen, I'm an American, I've got a couple of factories in England, but I'm from America. I'm not an English citizen, so, only citizens have to be on the best behaviour. This is like Charles, isn't it? That it's the Privy Council oath, no matter what happens, the king can do no wrong. All the Privy Councillors can see no wrong in the king. No matter what the king does, you shall, it's like, you shall not see the star, touch the star, smell the star. The king shall do no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. No matter what the king does, it shall never be wrong. Hey, look, it's Larry Ellison, he's in England. He's not a citizen of England, though, so he doesn't have to be on his best behaviour. So you don't worry if he happens to hit you around the head with a metal bar when, not delivering the boxes on time. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you should be pleased with it. Smile, smile for Larry. This is the thing, this is like, Charles on the Privy Council style. This is what these people want to do. No, Tony Blair, he might have made a few laws, he might have made the Senate illegally against the 1705 resolution, and he, might help John Major finish off, with the judicial oath contradicting itself, and he might have, sent us to war illegally and done whatever. But don't worry, it's Tony, he's privileged from Parliament, he can do these things, he's taking away our human rights from and privacy from us, literally as soon as he's made the Human Rights Act, Hey, we've just finished that Human Rights Act, complete and total privacy in your own home, so here's the Big Brother program where, there is no privacy, and, don't worry, you'll like this, we're really this is gonna be big, and then we can get everyone on Facebook as well, knocking up a digital profile, and you get used to it. Anyway.
I need 2 minutes to take a bathroom break, and we'll turn it off. The truth is, we don't really turn it off. What we do is we record it so no one can see it, but no one can get into that recording.
What the hell? Record it so no one can see it. What is the actual point in that?
Without a court order.
And I think that should scare.
Without a court order. But there's going to be no juries in the courts. There aren't going to be any juries in the courts. And just a minute, they've got Brian Leveson giving out investigatory powers. You're only be able to have to film something if you get permission for investigatory powers, right? Or it can't be filmed, right? So what Larry's actually trying to make out is that if we film absolutely everything in the first place, then they can go to Brian Leveson and say, hey, can we have this or that footage? Because, like asking God, because, he's seen in everything. But the idea is that nothing is meant to exist unless you have a reason and give evidence to Investigatory Powers Department to justify you going and recording it or going and getting evidence to find it out, right? Which completely turns against it. Nothing is allowed to be recorded or privacy can't be broken unless you give substantial evidence that somebody might have committed a crime, and then you go ask Brian Leveson for powers, and he says, oh yeah, you may go and get the evidence and record it. But the way that Larry says is that, everyone's, because, everyone's going to be guilty, right? Everyone's going to commit a crime sooner or later, so we might as well record it all, and then when they do, then we've already got it all, and you can get it from Brian Leveson, because we already suspected that you were going to do something, and this is when you get into this, presumption of guilt, right? The presumption of guilt, if these, how about the presumption of, these people have, robbed us blind and taken all this money from us, and they're holding it all, and there's a massive black hole in the economy, and they're just, they're conning us, How about that presumption?
For us to have one of the richest men in the world saying this, and at the same time, that same technology that's going to enable this, he's ultimately going to benefit from the use of that technology monetarily to make himself more money. That should concern all of us.
I'm going to lunch with my friends, or going in an hour for privacy with lunch with my friends. God bless. We won't listen in.
Now, that is the thing that got me to start this recording, because I have kind of waffled on a bit earlier on. I was waffling on quite a lot earlier on. So he's going for a lunch with his friends, right? And that is when you turn it off, right? But that's social, right? Just eating for the sake of eating is not social, right? If you're just going to, eat some nutrition pills, right, for nutrition, that is not social, okay? But if you're going with your friends and you're going to make it into a social occasion, right, that's social. That's when you've got more of a right to have it turned on, right? Because if there's an urgent pressing social need, right, you could say that if you're going to socialise for a meal, there's no urgent pressing social need to break your privacy, right, for people to look into your privacy. This is in the restaurants, right, This is like in the restaurants, Now, this is the thing. If you're multi-billionaires and you got a hell of a lot of money and you're in a very, very, very posh restaurant like what Macron likes in France, right, and there's all the protesters kicking off, right? Now, you're socialising, you're having food, and you're at risk because you're very rich and you might be robbed, right? So that would be when you have you could, under the Human Rights Act, ECHR, Article 8, you could say there is a strong case for having the surveillance on, right? On. Because they're socialising together, so it's social, and they're at risk because they're absolutely bloody loaded and they've got wallets in their, pockets with, $1,000 notes or, whatever, $1 billion checks and, credit cards with billions and, Bitcoin, fucking password written down, God knows what, right? That's when there's an urgent pressing social need because you've got a bunch of billionaires having a meal and they're all loaded and they might get robbed and they're wanting to socialise, right? Like in Macron's freaking restaurant, get their kicked down, right? Notice Larry Ellison has completely flipped it round and conned you. He's tricked and deceived you and pulled the biggest porky, the biggest fast one, the biggest bluff, lie ever concocted, and he's completely turned it round. The Human Rights Act, 1998, in Europe, Article 8, says that you can have surveillance on if there's and he's just given an example which is completely the opposite. He's just trying to make out that you shouldn't or wouldn't have the surveillance on. That's when you should turn it off when you're having a private meal with your friends, particularly if you're billionaires, when that's actually when you're more at risk. And in the Human Rights Act, in Blackstone's, it says that's when you can use it to argue for the surveillance. And he's saying this is when we want it turned off because he actually doesn't want everyone listening into what all his, Tony Blair and his business buddies are talking about over the lunch because they want to keep their private social restaurant conversations to themselves, right? But yet they're at risk and danger because they've got lots of money and they're high-profile elites in the restaurant, right? Now, that could be an argument when you have it on, right? But not when you're at home or walking around. If you're in your own house or if you're with your friends and you're not elite billionaires, and come on, let's face it, very few people are, so very few people would have that particular urgent social pressing need, right? When they're in the restaurant with their mates, most people can't afford Macron's restaurant, so, if most people went in Macron's restaurant, they might have to eat like one prawn, or like, oh, someone's going to steal my prawn. This restaurant's really expensive. I can't afford to eat in here. In fact, most people couldn't probably get into Macron's restaurant, right? Most people couldn't get in there. So I think that he's turned it around in that situation.
The Tony Blair Institute is a think tank in the UK, by far the largest. It has US levels of funding. Since Labour got into power, we've seen TBI have increasing influence on government policy. We know that Peter Kyle, the former technology secretary, that he was meeting Tony Blair himself every couple of weeks. It seems like ministers don't really have a full grasp of this stuff. So they're kind of like, oh, TBI knows how to do it.
Unless there's a court order.
The Tony Blair is going to enable this. He's ultimately going to benefit from the use of that technology monetarily to make himself more money. That should concern all of us.
I'm going to lunch with my friends, or going in an hour for privacy with lunch with my friends. God bless. We won't listen in unless there's a court order.
The Tony Blair.
Right. So, Larry, right? Can we get Larry back on here?
Or going...
Unless there's a court order. Larry! There's an act! There's a law, Larry! A law! There's a court order. Larry! Hello! Hello, Larry! Hello! There's something, Larry, called the law! Larry! The law! It's already made in effect, Larry. Like, you cannot walk down the street and nut someone, that's assault, right, Larry? You don't get caught to say, oh, you can't nut someone, right? Because judges don't make laws. You go to a judge after someone's broken the law, Larry, to tell them and put the evidence there, right? What do you think this is, an injunction? Larry, they already made the law. It's in force. Don't break it. It's called the Human Rights Act, Article 8. It's in effect, Larry. Comply with it, right? Comply with it. Oh, you can't make me. You can't make me. Oh, is how it works. Well, we can make you follow the law. Behaviors, everyone will be on their best behavior soon. Even Larry will be complying with the Human Rights Act, Article 8. In effect. And if he doesn't, maybe we can raise enough money to take him to the High Court, because the police ain't going to do anything. Larry, obey the law. That's the problem Tony Blair has got. Obey the 1705 resolution. Do not make any new privileges, Tony. Tony, right? Don't do it, Tony. Don't make any new privileges. It tells you not to do it, right? Now, if you do it, then we go to a court because you're being naughty and you have to be punished for doing what it said not to do. Behaviours. We've got to control behaviours, right? Now, non-citizen Larry... citizen nonce, I'm not a crook, well, you are in England, right? Well, you are in Europe when you break the Human Rights Act. I'm not a crook. Second point break, isn't it? The ex-presidents rob banks to finance their endless summer. I'm not a crook. Well, you are in, Larry, you're a crook in Europe because you broke the law that is in effect. You broke people's privacy. Right?
In an hour for privacy with lunch with my friends. God bless. We won't listen in unless there's a court order.
The Tony Blair Institute is...
So effectively what Larry's saying is, right, we're not going to follow the law unless you make us, right? That's it's like Tony Blair's one liner, and it's like someone else's problem. It's like, Larry Ellis, we're not going to follow the law unless you make us. Well, snap! That's what you're trying to get us to do. And we're not going to behave unless you make us. This is the thing. Well, you can't make us behave because we've got the right to freedom of speech and expression. Well, this is what, this is the thing. Well, we said that we weren't going to have digital ID, but we got you on Facebook. We said that you're going to have privacy in the home, but we put Big Brother program out there and everyone was like, perving on it. This thing, you don't do what we say what we do. Whatever we tell you we're going to do, we're not.
The think tank in the UK, by far the largest. It has US levels of funding. Since Labour got into power, we've seen TBI have increasing
Oracle, I need an hour for privacy with lunch with my friends. God bless. We won't listen in unless there's a court order.
The Tony Blair Institute is a...
He looks like Leon, doesn't he, that guy? He's like some kind of Leon guy.
Think tank in the UK, by far the largest. It has US levels of funding since Labour got into power.
Now, here's a guy, Keir Starmer. Now, this is the other thing, right? But what was that Larry comment? It was Tony Blair, wasn't it? It's Blair.
We've seen TBI have increasing influence on government policy. We know that Peter Kyle, the former technology secretary, that he was meeting Tony Blair himself every couple of weeks. It seems like ministers don't really have a full grasp of this stuff. So they're kind of like, oh, TBI knows how to do it. TBI is like really good with technology. So we'll just listen to them and take on kind of whatever they suggest. TBI will publish a report, and then within weeks or even days, the UK government has taken on their recommendations, essentially. And then on a kind of more international level, we see TBI as this more kind of consultancy advisory entity where you see TBI employees embedded within governments. A lot of countries in the global south, especially, we've seen that there's this kind of huge push by TBI for big tech and AI boosterism.
At the Tony Blair Institute, we believe that technology is key.
Is he? I'm sure he's stolen that logo from somewhere.
To reimagining the state.
Copied it.
There's a lot of concern among TBI and former TBI employees about this. A lot of employees told us they decided to work for TBI because they really believed in the mission of kind of encouraging governments to embrace technology, but in a kind of responsible, safe way. But that they realized it ended up being much more about trying to sell certain technologies. Staff were told to really push Oracle's services, and that they were having to do this despite kind of sometimes knowing that this wasn't the best option for the local populations. There were other companies offering better suited systems for those countries. Tech sales for Oracle, that's how people described it. They were having to do tech PR, tech sales, and that was not what they got into this job for. The influence and power of big tech is seeping into people's consciousness more and more. There's now a slow realization that this isn't going to benefit normal people. None of this is set to benefit us people on the ground. And by shining a light on these issues, I'm also hopeful that more journalists will start to look into the big tech lobby and how they're having such a big say at the moment in our policies, and to actually speak up against that and campaign for the big tech billionaires to have less influence. With our current media, BLAIR is going to be the one who
electronic health records, your genomic data. The NHS in the UK has an incredible amount of population data, but it's fragmented. It's not easily accessible by these AI models. We have to take all of this data we have in our country and move it into a
So take the data. We're not going to ask for it. You're not going to give us the data. We're going to take it from you.
Single, if you will, unified data.
Oh no, sorry. They've already taken it from us, right? Remember, the phone, it never goes off as you record everything, right? We're already doing that, right? Oh yeah, that's it. We're going to take that data from you, whether you like it or not. Even though, and then we're going to control your behaviours. You're not going to oppose us. Do it, right?
NHS data is a unique thing. It's clear that he basically he can play a role in that.
Data platform.
Advocated for ID card reporting. We found that
and the most important ones are social
reporting. He's always been
agnostic data. Your electronic health records, your genomic data. The NHS in the UK has an incredible
year of the UK government in Ireland that
national data. Put it into a database where it's easily consumable by the AI model, and then ask whatever question you like.
Through our reporting, we found that the UK government is starting to unify their data, and we've seen that the Tony Blair Institute has been advising them to do this. Tony Blair has always been a big advocate for ID cards in the UK, and more recently, digital ID cards, and the idea of that would be to bring together all personal data and have it in one place.
Digital ID will make our interactions with each other and with the state faster, cheaper, and more reliable.
There are arguments that it could be quite dangerous potentially to have personal data all in one place, and particularly if that system is run by one large private company. So it's interesting to see Tony Blair pushing this so hard, and then Oracle kind of.
So cheaper. It's quite funny to say that because there's quite a lot of videos out now saying that there's no such thing as that. Basically, they're just conjuring money up from nowhere, and the whole debt thing doesn't exist. But really, what they've been doing is taking money that doesn't really exist and giving it to themselves, right? And restricting what money we've got available by not giving us much money, and making themselves have more money. So why does he want to make it cheaper for the government when there's no restrictions on spending really truly of the government? Cheaper for who? For us, we can't afford anything. They're the ones who money's no object to them, right? So why do they need to make things cheaper for them when they don't have any problems with money or not affording anything, and only us? But when it comes to us paying taxes, the government actually, there's no such thing as the debt. So they don't really need to make it cheaper, right? So it's just doing it. He just wants to do it to have it, and to be able to make use of it, right? And quicker. He wants it quicker so they can execute things quicker and get things done, make changes quicker. They want to be able to make changes quicker and faster without us being able to kind of have as much time to intervene in it or, have a say in it. And they want to be able to execute things on us quite quickly as well, right? When sometimes that's a bad thing because you actually want to think about what you're doing before you do it, like with the pandemic when they made all the wrong mistakes. In fact, what Tony Blair just said then, right? He said, in fact, can I pull it back a bit? Let's just go back.
Personal data all in one place, and particularly if that system is run by one large private company. So it's interesting to see Tony Blair pushing this so hard, and then Oracle kind of standing by, potentially ready to take on this job. Important to say as well that Larry Ellison, back in 2001, after 9/11, advocated for ID cards then. So he's a large private company. So it's interesting to see Tony Blair pushing this so hard.
Digital ID will make our interactions with each other and with the state faster, cheaper, and more reliable.
Right, Tony, that would have been an absolute nightmare and disaster with this pandemic that we've just had, because the government were wrong about absolutely everything, Tony. The masks were really pointless. Natural immunity was a better thing, right? Getting food, eating too much food was bad. Diabetes didn't help it, right? Every single thing that you did in the pandemic has now been actually adjudged in front of the Senate in America, for sure, as a disaster and wrong. So if you had done that quicker, faster and more efficiently, you would have accelerated the pandemic and made it even worse. And in fact, what was needed to be done was to be patient and think about it when they figured out the vitamin E and things like that. And figured out that a lot of the precautions and measures were completely and totally pointless, which is thinking. But after all, you're a think tank. So accelerating the process of shutting down the social media and not letting people talk and being more efficient, not letting other scientists have a say and other scientists have an opinion, right? And getting the WHO into effect, right? And locking everyone down, for us, for the people, it would have actually been a utter and complete nightmare. In fact, it is a miracle that we did stand up to and resist it, Tony. So accelerating. So what I was saying then, Blair is wrong, because what made the pandemic response unreliable, Tony, was rushing into it too quickly, right? That's where the reliability failed, because you were so eager and urgent in a rush to censor all these eminent professors who are all experts in their fields with different opinions. You wanted to shut them down and not let them speak, and not let them talk, and not let them debate properly, right? You wanted to shut that down. And actually letting people talk and think about things, and talking about different ideas and criticise, was the actual thing which actually drew sense out of it in the end. And if you'd have accelerated that, the only thing that would have been more efficient would be that you could have shut those people down better and more efficiently, and your complete and total utter mistakes, which were an absolute farce, would have been just put into place quicker and more stronger, which is what you want to do with the WHO, right? And, Rand Paul in America is just, the Americans are leaving the WHO. The Americans are leaving the World Health Organization. So, they're out. So, it's just wrong.
There are arguments that it could be quite dangerous potentially to have personal data all in one place, and particularly if that system is run by one large private company. So it's interesting to see Tony Blair pushing this so hard, and then Oracle kind of standing by, potentially ready to take on this job. Important to say as well that Larry Ellison back in 2001 after 9/11 advocated for ID cards then. So he's always been an advocate for this as well.
Tell us a bit about what government should do in terms of its digital infrastructure, digital ID, data centers, and so on.
You have to take all of your healthcare data, your diagnostic data, your electronic health records, your genomic data. The NHS in the UK has an incredible amount of population data, but it's fragmented. It's not easily accessible by these AI models. We have to take all of this data we have in our country and move it in.
Take it. We're not going to ask for it. You're not going to give us it. We're going to take it, right? And the population. I think population is a popular word when they're looking at getting robots to replace most people, and all we've got left after that, when we're not going to work every day to keep fit, is our health, right? And there's people who are opposing these elites, when these elites aren't even citizens of the countries that they're wanting to impose policy on. Hey, I'm an American. I own YouTube. I'm going to buy, a couple of industry outlets in England. I'm going to impose this fucking policy on the country from overseas. But I'm not an English citizen. But, citizens have to behave. But when Larry's about, Citizen X, isn't it? Larry, Citizen X. Well, I'm not even a citizen, Larry's in town, best be on best behaviour. Well, everyone who's a citizen better be on best behaviour, but not Larry, because he's not a British citizen, so he doesn't have to behave.
To a single, if you will, unified data platform.
NHS data is a unique thing, a set of data that's been around for many, many decades, and there's not really anything quite like it. People like Larry Ellison see this trove of data as a kind of treasure chest because it's incredibly, potentially monetarily valuable for someone like him.
These AI models are trained primarily by data that's publicly available on the internet. Your national health records aren't available on the internet. That stuff is not available, but that's very precious, very, very precious for your data.
Well, you're just lying, aren't you? Larry, let's not bullshit anyone any longer. This phone I am holding in my hand, right, which many people who have got a similar phone have granted access to the microphones, and you said yourself that it never turns off, right? When you walk into the doctor's, the phone is listening and the battery doesn't die, Larry. And if you, Bill Gates, or any other developers, or, the anonymous who can hack like this, right, and don't give me all that accept consent policy tosh, right, if they want to listen into my doctor's conversations, they can listen in. The anonymous can listen in. Anyone can listen in, right? Don't give me that accept consent tosh, right? Allow access to microphone nonsense, right? Every single person, probably going back since Tony Blair was in government, didn't even need smartphones, when you were getting texts, right? How do we know that Bill Gates hasn't recorded, got a storage facility in Iceland, with mega big hard drives? How do we know that they haven't recorded every single conversation with the doctor about the medical problems, right? We didn't have to be, scans or, assessment reports or whatever. It could be straight from the horse's mouth, straight from the source, Statement. Personal statement, Larry, on every mobile phone. How does the information get onto the doctor's computer? When you tell him. Where'd you tell him? When you're in the doctor's, when you got your phone in your pocket. Larry, do you think that we are retarded, Larry? Because if so, you need to go stand in the corner of the room and face the wall.
From our reporting, we found that the Tony Blair Institute, the TBI, is really deeply embedded in Keir Starmer's government. There's a risk here that with TBI in the ear of the UK government and Larry Ellison in the ear of the TBI, that very valuable thing that we've got in the UK right now is going to be co-opted. That means that we're not going to benefit from that. Instead, this US millionaire is going to be the one who benefits. It also hands over all of our personal data, and that should concern all of us. Ellison and Blair were first pictured together in 2003 when Ellison donated supplies to specialist schools in the UK. And we know that since then they've been close friends. They've been seen pictured together on some of Ellison's massive yachts and on his Hawaiian island that he basically owns, Lanai Island it's called. Blair has recorded a video for Oracle.
Oracle has decades of experience in healthcare, and I've been immensely excited by the willingness to solve problems together for the greater good of humanity.
If Oracle's had loads of experience in healthcare, how's it got its information if Larry Ellison has just said that, they can't get hold of the data because it's not on the system? So how much, is this from private doctors, right? I don't know. I don't get that part. Maybe there's something I missed out on there, but he's just said that, these data sets are the ones that they want to get hold of. But then Blair just said that Oracle's got all this experience with healthcare information, which doesn't make sense to me. But anyway,
by the willingness to solve problems together for the greater good of humanity.
Right. I'm probably going to nail it on this one because I've spoken for far too long and my memory card kept filling up, and that means I'm going to have to edit together all of the sections into one, and it might not flow properly because I had to stop talking in between and then try and remember where I finished off. Blair, I might have to play that again now.
Video for Oracle.
Oracle has decades of experience in healthcare, and I've been immensely excited by the willingness to solve problems together for the...
Decades? We only just got smartphones recently. How long have you had this secret technology in the background, Tony?
And on his Hawaiian island that he basically owns, Lanai Island it's called. Blair has recorded a video for Oracle.
Oracle has decades of experience in healthcare, and I've been immensely excited by the willingness to solve problems together for the greater good of humanity.
For the greater good of humanity. Right. Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of England. For the greater good of humanity. So these are my closing points. Question 1. Is Keir Starmer calling off local council elections and mayor elections for the greater good of humanity? Yes or no? You're allowed one answer, yes or no, right? Keir Starmer, are you calling off elections for the greater good of humanity? Which means that the people aren't voting. Is the greater good of humanity actually, are the public humanity? Are the voters humanity? Are the people who the country's constituted out of, are the citizens, are the people, the subjects of the country, are they the humanity that you're talking about? And why are you calling off their elections if this is all for their greater good, if they should know better than anyone else and what they want or don't want, right? Because as far as I can see, this is for the greater good of the Labour Party. is for the greater good of Tony Blair, is for the greater good of an agenda, right? Blair, when something is for the greater good of humanity, don't you think that, a quote from Doctor Who, don't you think that humanity might have something to say about it? And don't you think that humanity might have something to say about it in the ballot box, Tony, right? And who is that video to? Who's Tony Blair's video actually pitching to? He ain't pitching to people who are voting in the mayor election because fucking Starmer's calling the cunts off, right? He's calling the fucking thing off. So, is this video just to Starmer? Is it just to Larry Ellison? Is it just to Donald Trump? To Elon Musk? Who's Blair talking to? You're not talking to the people who are voting in the fucking local mayor elections because Starmer's calling it off, so he can't be talking to humanity. It seems like he's talking to his friends. It seems like he's talking to the Labour Party, or not even the Labour Party, because not even they're going to get a chance to vote on it, right? It seems like Blair is talking to his cronies, to his investors, to his pals and buddies, to the other elite. He isn't talking to humanity. In fact, Double Down News had to investigate all this to get this information to bring this video to us, right? Blair, your Prime Minister friend Keir Starmer and yourself are making a statement that all you're doing is for humanity, right? Who is humanity? Can you write down on a piece of paper, right? To whom are you referring to when you say humanity? And in England, when you say humanity, are you or are you not referring to the British voters? And if so, why is Keir Starmer calling the elections off? Because his party's not popular. So, who are the humanity you are referring to if it's not the people going voting at the ballot box who might not want Labour in? Tony, which humanity are you referring to? The ones who go to the polling station? Because apparently they're not going now. So you can't be doing it for them. So I don't think you're doing it for humanity. And Larry Fink ain't doing it for British citizens because he isn't one, right? So you need to recheck who it's for. Because you aren't doing it for humanity when you call off a fucking election, right? You are not the Prime Minister. You are worth one vote in England, Tony, right? And if you've got money, you can use it to get a hell of a lot of petition signatures. Where are they? But you don't need petition signatures when there's an election on because it speaks for itself, right? Surely. So, my final closing point is vote for humanity. It's like Monster Raving Loony Party, isn't it? Vote for insanity. I've got a Monster Raving Loony Party rosette there. Vote Monster Raving Loony. Vote for insanity. Tony Blair, closing speech. Vote for humanity. Unless Starmer calls the fucking elections off, you can't vote for anyone, right? Vote for humanity, Tony. Vote for humanity. Vote for humanity. Vote for humanity. Vote for humanity. Unless they call it off. Call off humanity. Call off humanity. Keir Starmer is calling off humanity. He's calling it off. He's calling it off because it's only Labour cronies. It's elite cronies. Do it for the elite cronies, Keir. Do it for the elite. Team elite. Team crony. Team crony. Fuck humanity. That's a good one. Fuck humanity. Fuck them in the ballot box. Fuck humanity. Keir Starmer. Vote for humanity. No, don't vote for humanity. Vote for cronyism.